Got this recently, not the highest quality, but I think it can be turned to a nice tool. It says there razor steel, so it must be good. This top has been mushroomed considerably. I'm going to try to see if I can kind of peen that back before I file it away. I'd hate to remove that much steel. And the handle obviously needs some help. Well, here's the steel. I've never done this before. Instead of just filing off this big mushroom area, I decided to try to hammer it back down, and it actually worked okay. I mean, that's pretty smooth. It's a little rough in here, but you don't have that giant mushroom lip that was here. And this whole area here seems to have filled back out a little bit, so I'm kind of pleased with the way that happened. The whole process probably only took about 10 minutes. So I started sanding this with fine sandpaper 320, and there were a few pits that were kind of deep, and I noticed that it wasn't overly flat based on my sanding. So then I tried to attack it with this oil stone. I don't really use this for sharpening. I figure it might be a good vehicle to try to flatten this a little more. I did that for about an hour or so, but there was still some deep pits that the stone wasn't reaching because they were in a low spot. So I spent about an hour going to coarser, this is 220 sandpaper, basically spot sanding all the pits out and all the little blemishes, and I think it's looking pretty good. There's one side and there's the other. I was careful not to remove the little stamping where it says razor steel. There's still a little bit of a discoloration in there which isn't bothering me. But I got most of the pits out, and now it's just a matter of sanding it with finer grits to get a little more of a shine on it. As I look at the blade too, it looks like it might have the original milling marks from a very coarse stone at the factory is my guess. Either that or it was sharpened with a chainsaw. Hard to tell. I'm having a real tough time sharpening this steel. I put a decent enough primary bevel on it, and I got the giant divots and gouges out of the edge. Kind of under the impression this might be one of those $4.99 cleavers that you find in a store like Walmart or the dollar store. Well, I've just sanded this down to the metal on all the sides, and I've hence taken away a little bit of the rounding that I did before, but I'll have to add that back. I noticed that the mortises I drilled out weren't so perfect, and there were little void areas that may have to be filled. So I've sanded it to 220 grit, and it's looking pretty good. When I was machine and heavy sanding, instead of this being a square, it was kind of turning into a parallelogram, so I had to spend some time taking off basically these two corners. It's still not perfect, but it's close enough for me. And I just wet the wood to raise the grain, and I'm going to keep sanding down to finer and finer grits. So the handle is ready to be finished, and this is a piece of raw mahogany. I chose it because I thought the grain pattern was a little interesting, and I'm hoping that will pop once the finish is on. These pieces of mahogany here are just tung oil, and you've seen me apply it a few times at least. It's my go-to finish for most things, primarily because I have a quart container of it, which is about a liter, and it's probably going to last longer than me, and I do find it attractive. It's serviceable, it feels good in your hand. This particular piece has got tung oil on it, but before I put on the tung oil, I hit it with this Brazilian rosewood, which the stain imparted a beautiful brownish red, which I thought was very attractive. But if you compare the two, there's not a great difference between them. And I think if I kid myself, I'll say that this is a little bit browner, maybe a little bit darker. These pieces, these scrapers, are a lot older. They've had a few coats of tung oil put on them. So I think what I'm going to do is I think I'm going to duplicate this. I'm going to put the stain on the handle, give it a good day or two to dry out, and then a couple coats of tung oil, giving it a good day or so between coats to dry out. And here it is, just dampened with water, and you can kind of get a feel for the tiger striping in the grain. And this orangey color actually is kind of attractive too. It's a pretty good looking handle already. Let's see here. Whoa, now that's sharp. That's sharp. Well, here it is, all finished up and looking good. It's a little stained now because we've actually used it for a couple days. The handle kind of blocky and square, but comfortable in my hand and easy to use. It's starting to rust, which reminded me when I was a kid we used to have a kitchen knife that was kind of the color of this old tool, very dark gray. And I remember as a boy, if you really aggressively scrubbed it, you could get a shine on it. And as I put the magnet here, it sticks. So this is hopefully a quality steel, obviously not stainless, but like I say, time will tell. We'll see how well it holds the edge. We'll see how useful it proves to be.